Joining us now for a word brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Reuben. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
You should call you ambassador of Ogun State, by now.
Yeah, a proud ambassador of Ogun State, of my state. Morning to you, Bimbai. Thank you very much. I had a lovely time.
Good morning, Adefemi. Just Ogun to Lagos, just back and forth like that.
What can I say?
Well done.
What can I say? What can I say? Good morning to you, viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, there's been a military coup in Guinea-Bissau. Former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan is among the leaders trapped in the West African country as borders are closed and flights are grounded. Now, a group of senior military officers in Guinea-Bissau declared on Wednesday that they had seized total control of the country, suspended the electoral process and imposed a curfew. The so-called High Military Command for the Restoration of Order said President Umaru Sissoco Embalo had been detained. Now, Embalo confirmed his arrest in a phone call to France 24. During that phone call, he said that he was being held at the Army's General Staff headquarters and that no force was used against him. Now, the coup unfolded a day before the National Electoral Commission was scheduled to announce the provisional results of the presidential elections held on the 23rd of November, in which both Embalo, who wanted to be the first president in the country to be re-elected in nearly 30 years, and his rival, Fernando Diaz, both had claimed victory. Now, Diaz has also reportedly been detained. Guinea-Bissau has long been referred to as a narco state, especially by the United Nations, and it has also seen at least 9 coup attempts since gaining independence from Portugal in 1974. Moving on now to Washington, D.C., there has been a suspect. He's been identified following the shooting of 2 National Guardsmen outside the White House on Wednesday. Now, the suspect, Rahmatullah Laknwal, has been identified as the main suspect in this shooting. He is an Afghan national, and following this update, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services have stopped the processing of immigration requests for Afghan nationals indefinitely. The FBI are also investigating this ambush-style attack as a possible act of terror. Donald Trump already called it an act of terror, and the injured soldiers remain in critical condition, while the suspect himself was also injured in the incident, and he's currently being detained while being hospitalized. Coming home now. Now, you got President Donald Trump. He has blocked South Africa from participating in the 2026 edition of the G20 summit. This is, of course, happening in Miami next year, but it intensifies these already existing tensions between Washington and Pretoria. This is after Washington boycotted this year's meeting in Johannesburg. Now, the White House says that the decision follows South Africa's refusal to hand over the G20 presidency gavel to a junior US diplomat, a move Trump called an insult. He has now ordered that all US payments and subsidies to South Africa have been suspended immediately, accusing Pretoria of siding with China, Russia, and Iran. Now, staying with Donald Trump, he has unleashed a scathing personal attack against a journalist. This time it was New York Times reporter. She's a White House correspondent, Katie Rogers. He branded her a third-rate reporter who is ugly both inside and out. Now, he made those comments in a post on Truth Social. It came after the journalist, the New York Times, they published an article co-authored by Rogers and Dylan Friedman that highlighted signs of fatigue and reduced public schedule for Donald Trump, noting slower travel and moments where he appeared to doze off at events. Now, Trump's post also slammed the Times itself, called it a cheap rag and an enemy of the people. All of this coming just 2 weeks after he called Bloomberg's Catherine Lucy Piggy aboard Air Force One. Now, moving on now to our newspaper headlines, let's take a look at the front page of This Day. Now, This Day leads with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu declaring a national security emergency. He's ordered that major recruitment into the army and police force happen. This includes 20,000 new officers and directing DSS forest guards to flush out terrorists. He's also urged the National Assembly to work on state police, call on herders to end open grazing and praised recent rescues in Kebbi and in Kwara, vowing to free remaining abductees in Niger State. Let's move on to the leadership. Now, the leadership this morning does again weigh in with insecurity. You've got the Catholic Diocese of Kontagora, which has confirmed that unfortunately, the death, just up here, the death of two parents of the abducted students from St. Mary's Catholic School in Papuri, Niger State. Now, Anthony Musa, one of the parents, unfortunately died of a heart attack, while the cause of the woman, her death is still unknown. The cause of her death is unknown. Now, the school abduction left 265 students and their staff still in captivity at this point. Let's move on to the Daily Independent. The Daily Independent has news that the Senate has ordered an investigation into the sudden withdrawal of soldiers from Government Girls Comprehensive Secondary School in Maga over in Kebbi State just 45 minutes before 25 students were abducted on the 17th of November. Moving on to the Daily Sun. The Daily Sun has, again, the Senate demanding a security team overhaul and tougher action against rising insecurity. It also includes making kidnapping a capital offence. Lawmakers have also urged President Tinubu to review firearm laws to allow responsible citizens to own guns for self-defence and called for intensified intelligence-driven operations, aerial surveillance and community vigilance. Well, let's move on to the Vanguard this morning. The Vanguard does report that the DSS told the Federal High Court that Tukur Mamu received 50 million naira from terrorists involved in the 2022 Abuja-Kaduna train attack. He allegedly helped them demand ransoms and set up websites for their activities. Now, investigators have recovered cash, cars and other valuables from his home, and the trial continues on the 26th of November. So it's already started. The Punch this morning, let's take a look at that. Well, The Punch does report that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has sent 3 ambassadorial nominees, Kayode Are, Aminu Dalhatu and Ayodele Oke to the Senate for confirmation. Now, this comes more than 2 years after recalling all ambassadors and leaving missions essentially run by career staff. Now, the move marks the first step to restore Nigeria's diplomatic presence abroad. So these nominees are for United Kingdom, United States and France. About time, people would say. Now, moving on to the New Telegraph, the federal government has reportedly begun subtle disbursements of the 2025 capital budget, starting with lawmakers' constituency projects. Now, the 2025 budget, it total 54.99 trillion naira, with 23.96 trillion naira for capital expenditure. But most of the other projects across ministries are yet to receive any funding. Now, The Guardian this morning, its picture headline does show the members of the Southern Governors Forum who met to essentially present a united front on security and regional development issues targeting southern Nigeria. We were, of course, at this forum yesterday in Iperu, Ogun State. Moving on to the Daily Trust. The Daily Trust does look into these reports. We took it in the World Brief that Guinea-Bissau's military has, of course, staged a coup and it is detaining President Umaru Sissoco Embalou. Soldiers have taken over key government institutions. They have suspended the electoral process and have closed borders. Gunfire was heard around the presidential palace, heightening political uncertainty in the country. Moving on to our UK papers, we've got a double whammy. We've got the Daily Express and the Daily Mirror this morning. Now, both papers are, of course, looking at Rachel Reeves and the budget she delivered on Wednesday. It does, on one hand, so you've got the Daily Express, they've sort of condemned the budget for raising the amount of taxes paid by working class people while simultaneously increasing welfare spending. With a softer headline, though, the Mirror, which you can expect, does call Rachel Reeves the caring Chancellor. And it goes on to report that this was a budget with a Labour heart, full of measures that will appeal to Labour MPs, like axing the 2-child benefit cap and introducing a mansion tax. So definitely a warmer reception there. Those are your newspapers from around the world, as well as your World Brief. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Mumbai, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Adefemi. First of all, you've shamed me into going into the gym this morning because, oh, girl, you look fantastic. Anyway, now to serious issues of the day. I begin in South Africa with, issues between America and South Africa concerning the G20. Now, I think we have to remember that South Africa is a founding member of the G20. They are a full member as well, and that the G20 Leaders Summits are not held by invitation. As a fully fledged member of the G20, you are entitled to attend the summits, unless you choose not to, which is the right or the freedom that the United States exercised in the just concluded summit in South Africa. So Donald Trump saying that he bars or bans South Africa from attending the summit is just mere bravado, because he does not have the power to do that. And even if he does do that and South Africa decide that they're going to excuse themselves, there's UK 2026 to 2027, and I believe after that I think it's going to Asia, South Korea, either South Korea or Japan. So, I think within the constitutional realm of the G20, it's a multilateral organization that is guided by constitutional values. No member can unilaterally just wake up and say, I'm not going to allow another member to attend. Now we go to Guinea-Bissau. I listened to an intriguing analysis by Austin Naigbe of the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, and his own take on things, which I found to be interesting, slightly different, was that he felt that this coup is something that had been stage managed by Embalo himself, because of course we know that he just interfered in the just concluded elections, and they say that the results that were about to be announced clearly showed that he had lost the election. So there's somewhat of a conspiracy, if I may call it that, where the observers who had been on the ground are saying that, well, it almost appears as though the administration of Embalo has looked for a way to scuttle the election and just put the nation in a state of emergency, so to speak, while they regroup and see what to do next. It's just an analysis. I'm not sure if there's any water to it, but I thought it was an interesting take. As I conclude with Donald Trump, and very unfortunate what has happened to those National Guards in Washington, D.C. However, I took away from his speech where he made reference to Somalia. He first spoke about Afghanistan and those people who came in from Afghanistan, but then he also made reference to Somalia, and he said Somalia, that country that doesn't even have a government, very derogatory comments. And I found it a little bit confusing and jarring, because Somalian war is one of the United States' oldest wars. It's one of the forever wars. And since Donald Trump came into presidency, he has doubled the number of airstrikes on that country in his so-called fight against terrorism across the world. So I now say to myself that, Donald Trump, if Somalia doesn't have a government, if it's unstable, if it's as much as a failed state as you say it is, surely America has contributed by the persistent drone attacks that they've made in that country, and how American troops on the ground and American intervention, quote unquote, has actually led to further destabilization of Somalia. So we always have to remember that where global hegemonies are concerned, whether it be China, whether it be the United States, global hegemonies always act in self-interest. I think it's important for us to always remember that and take that away.
Okay, very quickly, the point about Donald Trump saying South Africa is not welcome in the G20 next year. Well, the G20 doesn't have a permanent secretariat. What it has is, the presidency, and the U.S. is going to be the next president. In diplomacy, there's something called persona non grata. When a receiving host country declares you a persona non grata, it means you are not welcome in their territory. It means you are not acceptable in their territory. There is no way the South African delegation will go to the U.S. without getting U.S. visas.
Yes.
And so this is a diplomatic battle between South Africa and the United States. Yeah. However, they say apart from that, they think they were embarrassed in South Africa because Ramaphosa, president of South Africa, decided to stand tall and would not break protocol by handing over to a junior official that the United States was going to send. So, and they say, they will withdraw subsidies, every support for South Africa. We're waiting for what the South African government will say in reaction to this. But the South African government should continue to stand tall, more so as it insists that the allegation of persecution of white Afrikaners on the part of President Trump and the United States is incorrect and misleading. Now, as for the killing of the 2 National Guards, in August, President Trump deployed about 2,200 National Guards because he said crime in Washington, D.C. was going out of control. Most of those persons, they came from West Virginia, they came from Nebraska, they came from, Philadelphia, from other parts of the U.S. They have limited authority, but they've been doing a lot of, showing off. And then 2 of them were shot by this Afghan refugee. Now, the Immigration Department has now said all applications for stay in immigration applications by all Afghans should be suspended. And Trump, of course, blames President Joe Biden for causing the problem. I still have so many other topics to treat. Okay, Guinea-Bissau, very quickly. Now, what we're seeing is democracy in retreat in Africa, as we have seen in Gabon, Chad, Niger, Guinea-Conakry, and now Guinea-Bissau, which became independent from Portugal in 1974. 2, the point is also about leadership. Sissoko Embalo became president in 2019. He was to use 5 years. His tenure, according to the opposition, was supposed to expire February 2025. So the opposition is saying he had even overstayed. However, the election was held, and then there is a controversy. He was claiming victory, and then Fernando Diaz was also claiming victory, supported by Pereira, the prime minister. And now you have this ugly situation. We say that it is unacceptable. The democratic process that has been truncated must be allowed to stand. And in this particular case also, we think that AU, ECOWAS speaking, is not enough. African leaders are trapped there. President Jonathan, leader of the West African Elders Forum, is trapped because all the borders have been closed. AU and ECOWAS and the Nigerian government should find ways to go and rescue those African leaders who do not deserve to be detained, because that's what it looks like in Guinea-Bissau, where they are trying to help the democratic process. And Nkah should be told that his intervention is unacceptable.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Reuben. Ayo, before we come to you for your comments, we're going to take this story so that you can also include it in your commentary. Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has forwarded the names of 3 non-career ambassadorial nominees to the Senate for confirmation. The nominees are Kayode Are from Ogun State, Aminu Dalhatu from Jigawa State, and Ayodele Oke from Oyo State. The request has been referred to the Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs for further legislative action, after which the committee will make recommendations for confirmation. Ayo.
All right, yes, you remember that I think a few weeks back we had actually said, following the news or the posts by President Trump, that the president was due to make announcements. In fact, we had predicted that by the following week, but I believe that there might have been some delays. We had said based on, they were going to expedite it, even with regards to the Senate confirmation. Following the diplomatic relations with the United States, there had been repeated calls for appointments, even if not all the foreign missions, but at least the key countries where we have significant relationships with. And in that line, the president has now released at least the first 3 names who will then be posted. I think significant amongst those, because some people have said, well, they are non-career diplomats. Yes. But each of them come with very extensive experience, whether in intelligence sharing or even in their relationships with diplomacy. For instance, Ambassador Ayo Oke, my namesake, of course, he's from Oyo State. He was the DG of the of NIA, and he also was as a diplomat, had also had opportunities in that experience. His experience, in fact, some people refer to him as teachers of ambassadors that usually when ambassadors are nominated, they would usually go to him. He had, and just have a briefing session. So in that regard, he's also had a lot of work in counterintelligence sharing. So the appointment is seen to be in the right direction ahead of his broader appointment. And this is, again, like I mentioned earlier on, what we have been calling for, that we must have a formal voice in these missions, foreign missions, that we have a key relationship with the United States. We also called on for the United Nations as well, beyond the countries. China as well is another country that we must look at in terms of furthering our diplomatic relationships with. Now, beyond that, looking at Trump and South Africa, talking about diplomatic relationships, quite unfortunate to see how this has unfortunately progressed or declined, if I may say that. President Trump has doubled down on his, attacking of, President Ramaphosa, despite the fact that we must commend his show of leadership and strength and his, the show that South Africa is a sovereign nation. He's a sovereign just like President Trump. Now, with regards to whether or not he can go, President Trump cannot take away his G20 membership. However, as the host country, they can determine who their guests would be. Yes. And to that extent, he can actually prevent South African president from participating at the G20 summit. Now, the conversation would then be that what would the other member nations do? Some people have actually called for them to also boycott, but I don't know if any of them will have the guts enough to stand up to America, who is now acting almost like a bully if they don't get their way. I mean, look at the way he's just insulted and body shamed the New York Times, White House correspondent. I think for a leader, that's incredible. I mean, it's difficult to understand. You can criticize her work, you can disagree with her position, but let it not go beyond that, and then we go to body shame. These are the things that we talk to teenagers about, and then the U.S. president is making such statements. Quite unfortunate. Now with Guinea-Bissau, yes. You already mentioned it's 7 schools since their independence in 1974, yes. And it's another one too many, despite the conspiracy theories, and I can understand why people would say that, people would begin to analyze in this direction. It's a conversation we must have across the West African region. I say this because when the other coups happen in Burkina Faso and the likes, we have talked about the fact that the African leaders, West African leaders, do not condemn what we call democratic coups, and that's why sometimes these agitations come. In fact, some of the military leaders in these countries have been praised as heroes. There's now a conspiracy that, they are doing better for the citizens, even more than democratically elected governments. And this is why we must continue to have the conversation that in order for us to not erode the democratic efforts of countries around Africa and West Africa, we must ensure that we strengthen our institutions so that the people believe that democratic style of government is the best way forward. It is the best way. There's no the other alternatives, despite its kinks here and there. The other alternatives do not bear even raising up as options. I believe it's time for the region as a whole to begin to have very serious conversations on how to preserve democracy and democratic ideals on the region, so that we do not see even more space of
Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, has issued a statement.
Yes.
But the details we won't have time to go into it. But he stressed the point that the G20 social in South Africa was attended by Americans and businesses and entities. Yes. And that South Africa is a sovereign country that will not be dictated to by Donald Trump.
We stand with you, President Ramaphosa. People, the best way to deal with the bully is to stand up to the bully and not cower. And so I'm glad that he's standing up. And the African continent must produce an African solution to African problems. I wanted to talk about my voice. There's so many voices in my head. But I was going to talk about the aid given to South Africa by American and the significant impact, especially with tackling HIV and HIV carriers. And South Africa is the home of the highest number in the world. So there are ramifications or consequences as a result of that, but we'll talk about that further later on. Thank you so much, Adefemi.